Back in the year 2000, I played a gig for about 70,000 people in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It was definitely a highlight of my life at the time. I remember we finished the song that I had played, and I looked out into this massive audience, and as I was walking off stage, I had an empty feeling in my stomach, and what it was all about is that my father wasn't there. And my father had never heard me play music and sing, really, and he had passed away several years before that. I remember walking off stage, and my buddy Denny grabbed a hold of me, and I started to cry, and of course he was amazed. What am I crying about? I said, my dad's not here. And I still have a photograph of Denny holding me at that moment. The backstory to all this is a couple of weeks prior to this gig, of course, I was very, very nervous. I was playing in a local bar band, and the band I was in, I played on weekends, and once in a while I'd go out on the road, play at a theater, then I'd come home and play with this band on weekends. We had a couple of guys that followed our band for about a year, and they were fake bikers, and what I mean by that, they were insurance salesmen that bought Harley Davidsons and would put leather jackets on Friday night and go out and curl their hair up and kind of try to act tough, and they used to make fun of us a lot, in particular our lead singer in the band, whose husband was a guitar player, but he never heard anything because he had earplugs in his ears. But I tell you what, I paid attention to these guys all the time. I'm drinking about 16 cups of coffee per night. I'm pretty wired. And this one night, it just all culminated in, I kind of had it with these guys. And luckily we took a break, and I went to the men's room. And when I opened the door of the men's room, some marijuana smoke came out the top of the door. And I ducked my head because I had been clean and wasn't doing that stuff anymore for quite some time. So I bent my head down to kind of get out of the way of that smoke, and the door was opened up by one of these bikers on the other side. And I remember he looked at me, he said, "After you, Four Eyes." Now, another backstory is that when I was about 4 years old, one of my eyes crossed, and I had patches over that eye for a couple of years. I had Coke bottles till I was, I guess, until glasses were made that didn't look like Coke bottles. But really a bad time to call me Four Eyes. And I remember I stopped, I took a deep breath, I let him go by, and part of me said, you know, I'm gonna kill this guy. And so I prayed to God. This is a warning to everyone to be careful how you listen, if it's God's voice or your voice. I said, you know, God, I really want to harm this guy. Help me to calm down. And God's voice spoke directly to me. And God said, take your glasses off first. And of course I did, and I went back in and grabbed the guy and went outside and with he and his friend, and it was all over pretty quick because I was just in a rage. And I remember the bouncer got there when it was all done. He said, holy cow, John, Denver goes wild. You know, and I apologize for my behavior, but I had to go to an anger management class when everything kind of got taken care of. And so I went back to my therapist, and my therapist, Ken, I'd worked with for many years, and you know, he says, where's the anger come from? We start talking, and of course we go back to that little boy and me. And that little boy was starting to talk a little more in the sessions that followed that, and I found out where some of that anger came from. And of course then the big gig in Minneapolis, and crying about my dad not being there. And what happened was, about a week and a half later, I had a dream, and in this dream my father came to me. And this is what I would call my spiritual awakening. In the dream, I'm getting ready to go out on stage, and I'm getting ready to pull apart these thick purple curtains to go out on stage. And my father's hand grabbed me by the left shoulder, my father's right hand, and I turned back and looked, and there was my dad. It was my good dad, the sober dad. He had beautiful green eyes and was always smiling, you know, that good dad. He said, I love you, you're really good. You're really good. And I woke up, and the next thing I remember, there was a couple of tears in my eyes, and I'm sitting up in my bed, and I'd wondered all these years why my dad, never showed up for stuff, even when he was around. And this light bulb went off in my head that my dad's an alcoholic. That's what alcoholics do, is they don't show up, and they're not there for you. And it wasn't what I thought it was all those years, that I wasn't good enough, And I forgave my dad, forgave him right there. About 3 seconds later, I realized that I'd followed the same path that he did, and I forgave myself. And then all of a sudden, it's like the sky opened up, the possibilities of a loving God coming into my life. This next song is called If You Can't Forgive.
Old man sitting by the sea, and tears rolling down his wind-worn cheeks. I hold my hand out, I ask him, can I help? He says, help me by listening to the story I tell. He said, my heart is full of anger, bitterness and fear. That's why I'm an old man, full of all these tears. And he said, empty your heart of all its bitterness. If you're angry at someone, then it's time to forgive, and fill it with love and a little gentleness. 'Cause you can't go on living if you can't forgive. He says, I know you've been hurt, son, and your hurt runs deep, but you don't have to end up an old man like me. He said, I sat here full of rage for all these years, 'cause nobody told me what I'm telling you here. He said, empty your heart of all its bitterness. If you're angry at something, then it's time to forgive, and fill it with love and a little gentleness. 'Cause you can't go on living if you can't forgive. He says you don't go on living if you can't forgive. Then he stood up and put his arm on me. He said, promise me one thing before you leave, that you'll empty your heart of all its bitterness. If you're angry at someone, then it's time to forgive, and fill it with love and a little gentleness. 'Cause you can't go on living if you can't forgive. He says you don't go on living, you can't go on living. He said, it just isn't living if you can't forgive.